Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of CounterCast, brought to you by Counterpoint, your one-stop shopping for some of the best editorial cartoons in the world. I'm Scott Stannis, one of the cartoonists here, and we're being joined by a very special guest. Rob Rogers is one of the best-known cartoonists in the country. Some of it not of his own doing, because and we're going to get into that in a minute. He's been a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize twice. You have a bunch of other awards, and and full disclosure, one of my very good friends. So we're going to have to, get that out front, just so you know. But we're not going to softball it too bad.
No dark secrets, Scott. No,
I've been to his basement.
What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, buddy.
What happens in Pittsburgh stays in Pittsburgh. Rob is living in Pittsburgh, has for quite some time, or is working at the Pittsburgh Press. And then when they shut down and merged with the Post Gazette, went to work for them. And then hijinks and high spirits ensued. Rob, you want to take it from there?
Sure. Yeah. So I started my career in 1984. That shows you how old I am. But I was at the Pittsburgh Press, which was a Scripps Howard newspaper. It was a little bit more blue collar afternoon paper, and that I really kind of got my feeling for doing a daily editorial cartoon there under the tutelage of Angus McCarran, who you know, Scott, you've met, and who later went to Memphis. But anyway, that was a great start for me because I wasn't really even sure where my politics were fully at the time. But I later sort of drifted left, and that became, my mainstay.
Let me ask you, so when you started, you weren't a liberal cartoonist?
I was, but I was not as liberal as I am now. I started out, sort of, I would say sort of moderate, really. And I think, politics have become so partisan that maybe I was, maybe I was more liberal then. It didn't take me long, is what I'm trying to tell you. My editor and my newspaper were conservative. And so they were running Scripps Howard cartoons on the editorial page. And then I kind of came in, and he liked my work. He liked how funny I was. He liked the drawings. The politics were still a little mushy for me because I was still getting my feet. And so I was more interested in the cartoons and the craft and the humor than I was really in politics, in high school and college. So for me, it kind of came later. But when you're sort of forced to look at issues every day, you start to realize where you stand on certain topics. And so that's what happened. I eventually drifted left. Or not drifted left, but I eventually started drawing more cartoons that I was passionate about. And, I was also getting encouragement from other cartoonists around the country that I was meeting and going, when we'd meet at these conventions, and they would say, well, yeah, Rogers is a joke guy. He does that really good joke cartoon that gets into Newsweek. But and so I started taking myself a little bit more seriously and thinking about the topics and trying to address issues that I cared about and issues that people cared about.
Yeah, I mean, I remember first couple of times we met, and I would jokingly talk on the phone, of course. And I would jokingly say, "So what? You tell me what you were writing." It was a gag. I'd say, "What's the point?"
Right. You and Ramirez. Remember that day we went to visit Ramirez, and you guys just kept saying, "What's the point, Rob? What's the point? What's the point?" I'll have you know, though, that day that we were at Ramirez's house, I was drawing a cartoon about Newt Gingrich, and there really was a point. It was but by that time the joke had stuck, and you guys were
yes, we had to say that every time. And
yeah, I had to say it every time.
But I do have to say that I thought the work you had done up to a certain point was lighter, and it was fun. The gag came first, and I mean that made you incredibly successful and very, very popular. But then, George, the election of 2000 comes around, and there is a metamorphosis in your thinking and in your work that's undeniable.
Well, it actually started with his father, because I remember you telling me, in fact, that was the point that you noticed a change in my cartoons. And it was around Tiananmen Square, and I had started doing cartoons about George H.W. Bush, and I remember you saying that to me, and it felt good because I knew you were my friend and you knew my work, but you weren't somebody to sugarcoat it. So I took it seriously, and I remember that. I also remember Joel Pett giving me a hard time a little bit after that, I guess, during the first Gulf War, when I was doing sort of jokey cartoons about Saddam Hussein at that time, and he was like, "Come on, man, this is a serious venue. That's a little bit jingoistic," and I started to think about it. I started to think, yeah, what am I saying with this? So yeah, there are a few moments and people in my life that, not to mention my wife Sylvia, who started to really ask, "What's the point?" And that's when I started turning things a little more serious.
And like I said, the 2000 election, seriously, you came out swinging and never stopped. I mean, it was passionate.
No, yeah. I mean, I really felt strongly that that was the beginning of really where the Republicans were starting to bully, their way into things, and including into a war in Iraq, and I was opposed. The funny thing is, I was opposed to the war in Afghanistan even, and my editor at the time, and my paper was liberal, but they were supporting the war, feeling like this was a response to 9/11, so why not? And I was against it. I was like, yeah, go after Osama bin Laden, but this is not, a war with Afghanistan is not right. And he called me in one day, and he said, you're drawing cartoons that are opposite of what we're saying on the editorial page. And I said, yeah, I know. He's like, okay, just want to make sure you were aware.
Yeah, I noticed, Jack.
Yeah. He's like, okay, I just want to make sure that you're aware that you're going against us here. And that was always, an unspoken, or not even unspoken. It was a spoken criteria that we had, was that I could draw what I wanted, and I could go against the newspaper in the rare occasion that I would, because like I said, they were liberal and I was liberal, and we really.
But you said that this is the press, right? You said you.
No, this was the Post Gazette, because this was Afghanistan. So I went to the Post Gazette in 1992. The strike was 92. So.
Oh wow! God.
So I know, I know, it was a long time ago. So I was only actually at the press for 9 years, and then I went to the Post Gazette, and I was there for 25 years. So, but this was at the Post Gazette right after 9/11. Well, shortly after, when the war with Afghanistan began, and I was doing cartoons criticizing it.
And so, okay, so now you're at the Post Gazette, and 25 years, and then at the end of 25 years, this.
Yeah. So that policy of me drawing whatever I wanted somehow changed without me knowing it. And my publisher fell in love with, like half the country did, with Donald Trump, and he felt like he was going to do something for this is what he said anyway. He said that Trump was going to really help the Rust Belt and help cities like Pittsburgh get jobs back, and maybe bring back steel. And everybody else on the paper was looking at him like,
seriously,
no, that's not really going to happen, and so he started to talk up Trump, started to talk about maybe endorsing Trump. And that's when my editor left. He was like, I can't do that, and he left the paper. And I stayed on, and I kept drawing cartoons about Trump. I had a couple of serious meetings with the publisher where he tried to sort of talk me into taking a more favorable look at Trump.
Trump love, yeah,
Trump love. I said, I can't really do that. I'm looking at a guy who's a liar and a misogynist and a bully, and who's somebody who just breaks all the rules, and just is really basically trying to burn the Constitution. And so anytime I would have a discussion with him, he could never argue logic or facts because the facts were against him as it concerned Trump.
Right.
And so he basically just said, all right, we'll just try to be a little nicer to him. And he let me go. But then in 2018, they hired a new editor, and the publisher sort of wanted the new editor to kind of rein me in. And that's when they started to kill the Trump cartoons. And there was never really an explanation or not even an ultimatum. They never said you can't draw Trump, even though they had highly encouraged me to change how I was drawing him. But they just started killing them, and they thought that that would somehow discourage me, but it really just made me mad. And so I kept drawing him. And then eventually, after 3 months, they killed 6 in a row without giving me any explanation. I called, I emailed, I tried to find out what was happening. And then they just said, we're not running it. And then I would submit another one the next day, and they would say yes. The one guy would say yes, then the publisher would say no and kill it at night. So it was a tough week. That week was really hard. And then I eventually took vacation days to try to wait and see what was going on, and to see if I could get them to come and sit down and talk to me about this. And they didn't. And then so I went on CNN, and that was it. Then they fired me.
What happened on CNN?
Well, I just, up to that point, people had noticed the cartoons were being killed, and social media was sort of blowing up, and people were saying, hey, what's happening? And they're killing Rob's Trump cartoons. And so Pittsburgh, at least the readership here was really angry about it. And that started to balloon and eventually made national news. Jake Tapper called and said, can you come on and talk to us? And I said, I'm still trying to figure out what they're doing. So I'm still an employee. I don't want to talk out of school at this point. I'm going to try to negotiate, try to talk to them about what's happening first. But he did ask me, are they killing the cartoons? And I said, yes. I mean, that's clear from the internet, from what had happened on Facebook. So I did say yes, but I can't really, comment. And then they finally, so after that week of killing the cartoons, what happened was they offered me a really bad working contract where I would have to come in to meet with them every single day. In other words, I was working from my home studio here, and they said, no, you got to come into the office, which was fine. I did that at the press. I was okay with that. But then they said, you have to show us at least 3 sketches. We have to approve it, and you have to come up with the ideas in conjunction with the editor and the publisher. And then the other part was that they wanted to own everything that I had ever drawn for the paper. And I wasn't allowed to syndicate anything that was killed, right? So which was different from our original arrangement. But anyway, so it got very complicated. I said no, but I'd love to sit down and actually talk about a real working plan, because my lawyer looked at the documents and he said, I've worked with oil companies. No, I've represented miners who, going against, I've seen contracts or negotiations with mining companies. These are the people that send, people into a hole to die. And he said, and these are worse than those contracts.
God.
So anyway, I said no to that, but I said I'd be happy to talk about other ways we can continue to work together, because I felt like, anything that wasn't about Trump was still, they were running it, and it was still a good cartoon up until this week where they killed everything. So anyway, what ended up happening was they called me back one more time, offered me a freelance contract. Oh, and they wouldn't even meet with me in person. They had me go to the lawyer's office. So that should tell you something right there. Yeah. So I went on. So what happened was, after that first negotiation where they handed me this contract with all these things, like, you have to do cartoons by committee. And I said no to that. I realized they're not really interested in negotiating with me. They're interested in dictating what I draw. Yeah. So that's when I said to Jake Tapper, okay, I can come on and talk about it. And that's what I did. so so then it was, they were mad about that. And so the next time I met with them, they had a freelance contract they were going to offer me, but again, it was really abysmal. So I said no. And
So
then
let me-
they fired me basically. And they offered me a severance, but I wouldn't have been able to talk about anything. And so I said no. I mean, so, you know, and then they tried to, and then when they were approached when the newsroom was all up in arms and said, you know, they were talking to the new editor who had fired me, and they were saying, you know, hey, what's going on? Why was he fired? And he tried to say, well, he wasn't fired. You know, that really wasn't what happened. And one of my friends said, raised his hand and said, oh, excuse me, you offered him a severance package. The word severance, it means fired. You know, so
what did he say to that? Or did he respond?
yeah, he didn't have anything to say. He just kind of went, you know. But I just found out, this is Keith Burris we're talking about, not to get into the weeds here, but I just found out yesterday that a few weeks ago or a couple of weeks ago, he stepped down. He's no longer at the paper. So he still does a column for them, but I don't know what the circumstances were or any of that. But yeah, it's been a mess since all this happened. They've done some other things.
Let me jump in and ask you, for the viewers who are unfamiliar with editorial cartooning and with how we work, why what they did with what they were requesting, why is that bad? Because there's a lot of jobs where they call you in and they say, you know, if you're a server at a restaurant or you know, whatever, you know, we need you to do it this way and do it our way. Or what was your objection to them dictating this? And I'm listen, I'm on your side. So I'm just,
no.
Those of us who may not know how we work, I need your explanation.
So basically, it's not so much that it's how they went about it. I mean, I understand that it's a private business. It's their newspaper. They can decide what they want on the editorial page. They could have come to me and said, Rob, we're turning this page into a conservative mecca. We no longer need your cartoons. In fact, I said to them when this first came up, when they said, you know, we want you to change what you're thinking about Trump, I said, well, listen, you know, I've seen it happen at other papers. Put me on the op-ed page. I can keep my local audience. I can do my local cartoons. I'm still your cartoonist, but I'm on the op-ed page. You can run a conservative guy on the editorial page. And
sounds reasonable.
Yeah, and actually the editor, Burris, he said, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. And then, but I don't think Block went for it. So they said no. It was more about the way they handled it. In other words, they could have come to me and said, we're changing the page. Thank you for your service. And you let me go, you know, and if they had done that before killing all the cartoons, frankly, it would have made a lot more sense. They could have, you know, I would have just left and said, they went to the dark side. What can I say? They're changing the format, but they didn't do that. They tried to they knew how popular I was in Pittsburgh, for one thing, and they knew it would be there'd be an outrage no matter what happened with the readers, even if they did it that way. But that would have been a much better way to handle it, because then they could have been honest, and I would have just been an employee who you know, an at-will employee who would have been fired or let go with severance. But instead they tried to force me to draw cartoons that I didn't believe in. And yeah, most cartoonists, I know there have been a few in our business who have been at the will of the editorial page, and they have to draw. It's almost like they're an illustrator for the editorial page editor or the editor of the paper or publisher. And so that had, but most of us, you know, all of my friends and your friends have an arrangement whereby it's your idea.
Yeah.
You do have to get it approved. I mean, because if they're the ones facing libel or facing, you know, outrage from the readers and the advertisers. But in the end, it's your idea, and they either kill it or they use it. And so before this, I had 1 or 2 cartoons killed a year, because I was always willing to work to get something better if it wasn't going to get in the paper.
Sure.
And we all do that. But this became unprecedented. They killed 18 cartoons.
Oh my God.
In a span of 3 months, not even a year. That was so they were really out to get me. And I don't know really what they hoped would happen, but
Wow. You know,
But that's
you're
what
also
happened.
talking, but I mean, I'm not talking out of school. It was a news story. The publisher who spearheaded all this, you know, comes, was it a week or so after they let you go, comes staggering in drunk into the newsroom on a weekend and berates everyone for being awful and not and ingrates. It's like,
Yeah, yeah, it was it was months later, but it was, yeah, it was, he was, it made news, and it was about the poster that they had. You know, they were fighting with the union. I was not part of the guild because the editorial page was exempt, but the rest of the newsroom is guild, and they were working on trying to get a new contract. They hadn't had a contract for years. They were cutting their health care, so they had a big poster on, you know, on their legally, you know, the bulletin board that is legally theirs by law, you know, in terms of like labor laws.
yeah, yeah.
And they had a big poster that just said "Shame on the Blocks," really big, the Block family. And so he came into the newsroom, dragged his young 12-year-old daughter in there, and started yelling at everybody and pointing at the sign, saying, "Look, honey, they're calling, you know, they're saying shame on you too." And she was really terrified. So they had to call in the editor to come and get him.
Yeah, for those of you who are maybe unfamiliar with how we work, how editorial cartooning works, is, and there really was, always has been, even when there were newspapers with us on them, some confusion as to what we were. Rob works the same way I do. Well, I'd say 90% of other cartoonists work, is that we feel we're an independent voice, which makes sense. Our names are on the product. It says Rob Rogers on his cartoon. It says Scott Stannis on my cartoon. And that we were viewed, and when I got the job, even at the Chicago Tribune, it was viewed as I'm an independent voice. I'm a columnist. Rob was a columnist. We're not there to be lockstep with the editorial page. And there are times when my cartoons disagreed with the position of the Chicago Tribune, and they knew that was going to happen. I knew it was going to happen, and when it did happen, we're like, "Oh, gee, that happened," because, you know, we were all, what's the word I'm looking for, grown-ups, and recognized what the relationship was. And if they, and I swear, if a paper I was with had gone suddenly, you know, very far left, I couldn't do that. I mean, I just would, you know, we'd have a problem. And same with you. So since then, what are you doing for, you know, a living?
Well, you know, that made some
You kind of
news.
set the standard going forward too, as there's what, maybe a dozen of what you and I would call a staff editorial cartoonist. That is, your primary job is to create an editorial cartoon a day, and you're paid a salary and get benefits.
Right. Yeah. So that sort of job description is fading fast as newspapers become less marketable and don't have the kind of resources they used to have with advertising and everything else to pay a cartoonist. So so since then, I've had a lot of love from, you know, from my fans and from readers out there. Started a Patreon page. I'm working on that, and people can support me on that. And then I also have the very fine luck of being part of Counterpoint, which is this great organization of left and right cartoonists fighting it out each day in the newsletter. And that they pay cartoonists. So, you know, that's a really great thing.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
then I have syndication and another freelance thing that I'm doing. So it's
is that the Tiny View thing? Tiny View?
Tiny View. It's an app for comics to read them on your phone, and you can read them vertically. It works best when I do a multi-panel cartoon, so it's not always ideal, but they have some other great comics on there, and it's very cool. But it's a new world, you know. I have like these 3 or 4 things going on that I'm juggling at the same time. But you know, but it makes sense, and it works. And this is sort of the new frontier for cartooning, I think, is that satire, I think, is needed now more than ever, and it will be there, but it'll just take on a different form.
But don't you think with cancel culture, with wokeness, and with all that stuff, either for the positive elements of that and the negative elements of that satire is really becoming kind of rare because people don't seem to get it. No, I'm serious. I mean, it's really, especially working like you and I do in a lot of metaphors.
Yeah.
Those metaphors get misinterpreted. I mean, where do we go from here?
You know, that's a good question. I wish I had the answer. I'd probably make some good bucks if I did. But I think it'll continue to develop online in ways that that we're not even aware of yet. I mean, I've been trying my hand at making, short little videos of my drawings and every now and then putting in some commentary of my own in there. And that's been fun. I do think that places like the nib.com, where they have young cartoonists doing long form comics about all kinds of really important issues, I think is sort of a new thing that could be the new frontier.
But you've done long form, your local work, the Brood on Grant.
That's more of that's more of a multi-panel thing. By long form, I mean they do some on there that are graphic novel length almost.
Yeah, maybe a little too long sometimes.
But yes, I mean my local cartoon was a multi-panel thing that I did every week, and I miss that. I mean that's the one thing I miss most about doing. About not having a staff job and not having a readership that is, there every morning looking at the paper. And that's because, you really find a connection with the local issues, especially.
Are you not doing Brood on Grant anymore? I thought someone had picked it up.
I did it last year. I did it for a year with an organization called the Pittsburgh Current. Unfortunately, they, have, like every startup of a newspaper, they've fallen on hard times, and so they really.
Oh, it sucks because I love Brood on Grant. I really did.
Thank you. Yeah, I miss doing it, and it was a lot of fun, and people seem to like it. That was one of the favorite things in the paper for a lot of readers in Pittsburgh.
Well, that sucks.
Yeah.
But on the upswing, on the up note, you're making a living.
Yes, I'm doing fine actually. I mean, the interesting thing to me is. If I was a lot younger, I think it would have been a much harder transition for me.
Really?
Well, in a weird way, like, in other words, because I have worked for enough time that I had some savings. I wasn't desperate. My wife has a job. She has healthcare. So I feel very lucky to be in a position where I didn't have to, run out and get a job at Starbucks or something. And not everybody's that lucky. I mean, if this had happened when we first started out, I think it would have been a much bigger struggle for me to think about whether I was really going to stay in the field, but now, I mean, now there are enough opportunities out there that I feel like, because I am somewhat comfortable in terms of just not having to, worry about mortgage or some other things, I'm good. And, I'm not making the salary at all that I was.
No.
Maybe I'm making more than I did when I started in the business. Let's put it that way.
Can I ask how much you made when you started?
I started out at $24,500.
I started at
$1,000. Huh?
I started at 22.
Yeah, there you go.
And I swore when I got the job, I'm like going, oh my God, I cannot make more money than this. This is unbelievable.
Well, guess what? Yeah.
What's old is new again.
Yes.
No, I think you're right. I think the aging thing, obviously there are different financial pressures on you, or at least they're considerably lighter. Things are paid for. I don't know. But health insurance was the only thing that shocked me. When I left the Chicago Tribune, it was like, how much is it? Wait, what?
And even, I mean, to be honest, I'm very happy that Obamacare is still around, but even Obamacare, it's not the same as having, your company pay a big chunk of your health care. I mean, it really isn't. And so, but thankfully and fortunate for me, my wife has a job and she has health care. So
you keep bragging about this.
No, I'm not trying to brag. No, I just feel like, there are, I mean, if she didn't, we would pay. And I looked into it too, but it is more expensive. I honestly don't know how, a lot of artists do it, freelance artists, with the cost of everything these days. It seems very difficult for them.
Does Coquita have a job yet? Because we can brag about that.
Oh, our new dog.
There's a new addition to the Rogers household.
Yes, she is. She's not here. She's upstairs right now, so I can't bring her on camera. But
Oh, that's too bad.
She's very cute.
She is adorable.
We have not found a way to have her do work yet. We're trying to figure that out. She might be able to make money with an Instagram account or something. Maybe that would be good.
Actually, your wife is doing. Can we just plug this for a second? Because Janine and I are just absolutely fascinated by. There's a graveyard near you, and during COVID, she decided to stroll around and started researching these stories. And she posted one the other day, if I may, and it was about.
Well, just to give people it's called Allegheny Epitaphs,
and it's on. Is it just Instagram or is it?
Yes, just Instagram, and she started taking walks in the cemetery, Allegheny Cemetery, near where we live, during the pandemic, and would stop and take a picture of a gravestone once in a while. She's an art historian by trade, so for her it just became fascinating to look and see what happened to these people, and it turned into an Instagram sort of art project where she researches them online, and there's a lot you can find now with Ancestry and other things. Documents and other things. So she's had a great time with it. And
she did one. I mean, one of the more recent ones was a man who died fairly young in his 20s, and she researched him, and it's fascinating. He graduated from dentistry school when it was becoming more professionalized.
Right.
He graduated with a class that had the first woman dentist, graduated from that class, and he got married right after college, started up a practice, and sadly passed away, I think 6 or 8 months afterwards from typhoid.
Yeah, there was a big typhoid scare. This was around the turn of the other century.
20th century, yeah.
20th century. Yeah, going into the 20th century. And I think it was 1908 maybe, or
yeah.
But I mean, poor guy, 2 years or I don't know, 2 years into getting a new house and moving into a neighborhood that he loved. It's some of these stories are just heartbreaking,
And what's the name of tell people again where they can go see this?
It's called Allegheny Epitaphs, and it's on Instagram.
Oh, it's really honest. I'm hooked. I'm totally hooked on it. It's wonderful. So on that note, I think we're going to wrap things up. Rob, where can they find Rob Rogers stuff?
So yes, I mean, aside from the lovely and entertaining Counterpoint newsletter, you can see my stuff at robrogers.com. I have a YouTube channel. You can also see my work through Andrews McMeel syndication at Go Comics, and also on TinyView, tinyview.com. But I suggest downloading the app. It's much easier.
The side of, excuse me, Rob, that people don't know is he's also a writer, singer-songwriter. Dang it. Excuse me. Can they see your work? It's choking me up just thinking about the songs, Rob.
No, I haven't actually fully finished anything. I'm terrible about that. The funny thing is, for someone who worked on a daily deadline for 30 some odd years, finishing other kinds of projects like my music and stuff, it's just been terrible. So no, but now that I'm doing more YouTube videos, I may try to get into using some of my own music in there. So
I've used Rob's music I've done a number of podcasts using his music as the intro and outro music. So
there you go.
Right there. Anyway, Rob, thanks for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Scott. Appreciate it. And thanks to Counterpoint for doing this for us.
God bless Counterpoint. And if you want to subscribe to it, go to counterpoint.com. It's just that simple. Until then, this is Scott Stantis. I'm with Counterpoint. This is CounterCast. Until next time, we're seeing the funny papers.